So, even myself, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not a technical person, but recently I've been leaning into using an application that uses AI to kind of teach me how to code. So, I've managed to build my own website and I still need to debug some of it, but I've managed to use it to build my own website from scratch. And that's something that I would not have been able to do without it. So yeah, that's obviously the one thing that I encourage everyone to kind of lean into. And sometimes there are these things where you know that you're not going to be able to fight it. Like AI is here to stay, whether we like it or not. Similarly with crypto, I think blockchain technology is always going to be here to stay, whether we like it or not. And a big part of why I wrote the book as well is to encourage people that if you know that this is going to stay, the best way to really shape how you want it to be is to be involved in it yourself rather than it just happening to you.
Welcome to Only the Savvy. I'm your host, Nicole, and today we have Debbie Soon, co-founder of Hug and a trailblazer in the industry. Hug is a global on-chain creative community and marketplace, now part of the .art. Debbie is here to talk about her upcoming book, Digital Mavericks, and share her incredible journey with us. Debbie, thank you for joining the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Debbie, you've had an incredible career spanning multiple industries, continents. Take us back to the beginning. What sparked your passion for innovation, entrepreneurship, and how did you become one of the most respected voices in your field?
Gosh, yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And every time I look back at my background, sometimes I can't believe how diverse it is. And sometimes it's hard to even explain it really. But yeah, I guess it all started from Singapore. That's where I'm from, Singapore, born and raised. I had a very traditional conservative Asian upbringing. So, my parents always wanted us to become doctors, lawyers, accountants, one of those career fields. I don't know. I feel like ever since I was a little girl, I always dreamt of something more. So even though there wasn't really a lot of opportunity to really explore outside of traditional career fields, I do feel like from a really young age, I was always kind of craving to make it out there on my own. But anyway, as I guess, I still listened to my parents. I went to college and got a degree in economics. My first job was in finance. So I spent 7 years in the traditional finance world. But through that, I actually found a love for business and entrepreneurship. As part of my job, I had to interview and analyze a lot of different companies and look at all of these different business strategies, especially in the consumer space. So much so that I think 2 years into my finance career, I decided that I wanted to start a business of my own without really knowing anything. So I rented a space that was 2 blocks away from the office. Basically founded Singapore and Southeast Asia's first boutique indoor cycling studio. So it was like a soul cycle, the very first concept of its kind at the time in the region. And that became a little side hustle. So I would kind of run over there at lunchtime, before work, after work. I was an instructor. I was also the front of house. Like over the weekend, I'll be like cleaning the bathrooms. And I think that taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about business and entrepreneurship, but also taught me a lot about what I didn't know. But yeah, that was a great experience. I ended up selling the business a couple of years later, partly because there was an interested buyer. Another part of it was that I think my boss kind of realized that I had this little side hustle on the side. And so, ended up selling that. But nonetheless, I think ever since then, and that was, over 10 years ago now, I have always had that little like thing inside of me where I really wanted to roll up my sleeves and get my hands dirty.
Wow, what an incredible and inspiring journey you've had. So let's jump into the impact of Hug. As the co founder of Hug, a global on chain creative community and marketplace, you've made a significant impact in this creative industry. Can you tell us about Hug's mission, some of its key achievements, and how it has shaped your perspective on supporting the creative community?
Yeah, and I think I have a lot of that to thank too for, the rest of my career. After finance, I ended up entering the world of live sports. It was a startup that was, a little bigger. I think it had like 100 to 150 people at a time that I joined. It was a company called One, and they were kind of like UFC's competitor in Asia. And that mission was really about kind of elevating these athletes from Asia and putting them on a global stage. So I learned a lot again, once again, from the world of live sports, and that mission too really resonated with me. And so when I made a transition and moved from Singapore to the US and found myself starting to develop an interest in blockchain technology and in crypto, I saw firsthand for myself how technology has the opportunity to really transform the lives of these creators and offer them a new way of monetizing their know-how, and also a new way for them to really own and connect with their audiences. So Hug was founded, I guess, 3 years ago, really with kind of a similar mission to, what I had experienced and what I was a part of at One. That was really about, unleashing kind of global superheroes, like in the form of athletes on the world stage. At Hug, we always said our mission was, how do we help creators become entrepreneurs and be successful in that sense? And how do we give them the tools, the resources, the technology, and really help them take their creativity one step further? We already know that they're super talented, but how can we take that and empower them to turn it into a sustainable business? So that really was what Hug was all about. In the past few years, we went from literally an idea on a piece of paper to growing to over 35,000 creators that represent 180 different countries. We have worked with brands who are like-minded and distributed over $300 to $350,000 of grants and scholarships. We have personally mentored thousands of creators, introducing them to not just the blockchain, but also new tools like generative AI and how they can collaborate with it to enhance their process. And we've just really created a really nurturing community where they see themselves as artists, because actually a lot of the times I meet a lot of artists where they sometimes don't believe that they are artists, and it takes kind of being around fellow creative people, kind of being given that opportunity and seeing their art on a national or a global stage for them to really find that confidence in themselves, and then deciding which way that they want to kind of go forward and take their journey to the next level.
Anyone that I meet in the creative industry always directs me to Hug all the time. So you guys are doing phenomenal things. If any creative person that I'm speaking to is constantly just like directing you to Hug, which is really cool. So I want to jump into your upcoming book, Digital Mavericks. Promises to be a game changer. What inspired you to write this book, and what can readers expect to learn from it? How does it reflect your own experiences as a digital maverick?
Yeah, so I relocated to the US 4 years ago now, which is crazy. Time flies. But like I mentioned, I was working in the world of live sports. It was great. I had a lot of fun. But then the pandemic happened. And as it is during the pandemic, not a very fun time to be working in the live sports or live events industry. And I don't know, there was something about that time that called out to me where it felt like this is the right time to just make a change and to just explore a new chapter of my life. So I had previously done grad school in the US. It was a long time ago, but that's always been a part of me that had wanted to kind of return and figure out what it would be like to live and work there. And I guess at that strange crossroads in the middle of the pandemic, it felt like the right time to quit my job, pack two suitcases, bring my dog, and moved over to the US, obviously. I got to LA and then realized that everything was still kind of in lockdown. There wasn't really any opportunity to meet people at all. I guess I, just like everybody else, started spending a lot of time online and on the internet. But I had personally been invested in crypto since 2019, but to be honest, didn't really know much about what I was doing. I didn't really understand it at all. It was just more people were talking about it. I thought I'll buy something here and there, like didn't really care how the technology worked. I was like really busy anyway. So I would say 2021 was the time that I really took the time to understand it. And I think the more that I understood how the technology worked, the more I started speaking and meeting with people online about it, the more I was convinced that this is the future of the internet. And I started founding Hug by essentially meeting my co-founder, Randy Zuckerberg, in an internet chat room, right? Like, so, which I don't know. I mean, people meet each other all the time now, I guess, on apps, but this really felt like the good old days of where you were meeting somebody in an internet chat room, had no idea what the other person looked like. We jump in a Zoom call, and the next thing we know, we're building a company together. And fast forward 3 years, we've sold a company and we've built this thriving community. But essentially, I wrote the book because I felt like my journey into crypto, or my journey into what we call Web3, was something that was so unexpected. I feel like a lot of people would have, looked at me and, I'm not a technical person. What do I know about emerging technology? Like, my entire career at that point had largely been involved in consumer, and obviously consumer behaviors are changing all the time, but I had never really worked on a tech product or anything. But my experience at least showed me that I could have taken everything that I've learned across my entire career from my own kind of personal interests and really applied it in a way where this is such a new and nascent field that there were so many opportunities for me to establish a presence and a career for myself. And so I wrote this book really because I wanted to demystify a lot of the misconceptions that people had about crypto. And I know we live in a world where publications just want to get clickbait head titles, and people want to say it's a scam, and that's what get people's talking about it. And I get that it's really easy to lean into that narrative, but I wanted to take this opportunity to show that taking the technology aside, at the end of the day, behind this industry and the people that are showing up every single day are just people like you and I. And we all have really regular stories, like I grew up in a middle class family, the younger of the younger of two siblings. And there's so many people who have like such relatable stories too before they enter the space as well. And I think, I covered the stories of 13 people in here. And I would say this has to be something in every single one of their stories that people could see themselves in. So it's 50% that, but 50% just a very practical guide on how you can just enter and navigate the crypto space, even if you're hearing about it for the first time.
Ooh, can't wait to dive into this book and find out more details. But before we get to that, throughout your career, you faced numerous challenges and setbacks. How have you overcome these obstacles, and what advice would you give to our viewers who may be struggling with their own entrepreneurial journeys as well?
Yeah, gosh, I mean, entrepreneurship, it's never easy. I think that is something that it is, the highs are really high and the lows are really low. And sorry that my dog is like prancing around in the background. But yeah, the highs are really high, the lows are really low. It can be one of the most fulfilling journeys, but it can also be one of the loneliest journeys. In some ways, starting a business, it really feels, and I'm not a mom, so maybe it's hard for me to really use that analogy, but sometimes it really does feel like your baby. You go to sleep thinking about it, you wake up thinking about it, and your entire day it's fixated on this one thing and the problems that you're trying to solve. I guess one piece of advice that I would say is that to really just kind of lean into that never really goes away. But also to be honest with yourself. I think, startups can fail. I don't know what the statistic is, probably 9 out of 10 startups fail, maybe even more. And they could all fail for a variety of reasons. They could fail from falling out with your co-founder. They could fail from, spending your money too quickly. It could fail from not being aggressive enough. It could fail from just being at the wrong time at the wrong place. It could fail from not, finding product market fit. There are many, many reasons why a startup could fail. But I think at the end of the day, if the vision is there and you're willing to kind of give it a shot, they always say you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take. So, and honestly, even with my book, like the first step that I say, even in entering the crypto space, and I would say that too, even as an entrepreneur, is to really kind of reflect deep down on what your why is. Like, why are you starting this business? Or why do you want to learn more about crypto? And I think being really, really connected to your why is something that will allow you to that will kind of help you through the darker days, if you will, because you're reminding yourself what was it that made you start on this crazy journey in the first place.
Wow, thank you for that. That'll definitely resonate with a lot of viewers trying to be in that position right now. As someone with extensive experience in multiple industries, what are some of the most significant trends or shifts that you're seeing right now, and how can our viewers stay ahead of that curve?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been the talk of the town now for the past couple of years. AI, and everyone is using it in some shape or form in their daily lives. And if not, I hope people are. And again, AI is just like crypto. It is one of those things where people are going, and I mentioned this in my book as well, people are going to fear the things that you don't understand. It's human nature. And when you don't understand something, you fear it and you feel threatened by it. It's a completely natural human response to, to something that you are unsure of what it even is or does. I feel like, and obviously there's a lot of debate over how it is applied and the ethics behind it. But as a technology itself, I've seen as well, not just from the creative, not just in working with artists, whom I've seen it really used as a creative collaborator, but I've also seen artists and creators and entrepreneurs. And I look at all artists as small business owners, to be honest. I always say every single artist is an entrepreneur and every entrepreneur is an artist. But I've seen them lean into using AI tools as a way to really make their process quicker. So whether it is about crafting a social media post, and I'm not saying that you rip off whatever ChatGPT says to you wholesale, but whether it's about helping with the ideation and helping you to iterate, I've just seen it personally, enhance so many people's work processes. And so, that's something that I encourage everybody to stay on top of, no matter what your own personal feelings are about it. And I've also always believed in this saying, which is strong opinions loosely held, that it's okay to feel a certain way about something, but to really open yourself up to the possibility of what it could be or what something could or couldn't be. So, even myself, like I mentioned earlier, I'm not a technical person, but recently I've been leaning into using an application that uses AI to kind of teach me how to code. So, I've managed to build my own website, and I still need to debug some of it, but I've managed to use it to build my own website from scratch. And that's something that I would not have been able to do without it. So yeah, that's obviously the one thing that I encourage everyone to kind of lean into. And, sometimes there are these things where that you're not going to be able to fight it. Like AI is here to stay whether we like it or not. Similarly with crypto, I think blockchain technology is always going to be here to stay whether we like it or not. And, a big part of why I wrote the book as well is to encourage people that if you know that this is going to stay, the best way to really shape how you want it to be is to be involved in it yourself rather than it just happening to you.
Absolutely, Debbie. Couldn't agree with you more. I mean, we just had the Super Bowl this Sunday, and I think a majority of those commercials were AI commercials, which speaks volumes on where we're heading with this right now.
Mm-hmm.
But moving into other things with networking and mentors for you, you've had incredible network of mentors and peers throughout your career. Who have been some of the most influential people in your life, and how have they helped shape your path?
Oh gosh, yeah, it's so important to find a mentor, and honestly, it's not the easiest too. I wouldn't even like consider myself as someone who has like one person on speed dial, but I think I always believe in surrounding myself with the people that I want to be most like, and so if you surround yourself with people who are great, that greatness will kind of rub off on you is one thing that I had learned. I have a lot of people to credit, for where I am today, whether, no matter how like frequently or infrequently I speak to them. But my boss from one, his name is Chatri, and I felt like he really took a chance on me when he hired me. I at the time had only had experience in finance, but He basically was, I think that you could be really good at whatever this job is. And at the time when I joined the company, I had no idea what, what job I was signing up for. But, he kind of really threw me into the deep end. And, I was almost kind of like that entrepreneur within the company where I was helping take one and expand it into new markets. So I took the mixed martial arts promotion. I took it into Japan for the first time. I took it into esports for the first time. I had to help to build the entire consumer products division. So I did a lot of these things where like I was able to really hone my entrepreneurial skills while at the same time having the backdrop, if you will, or the support of a larger organization behind it, which I think was incredibly fortunate. I have a great mentor, and this lady called Cheryl Kellen. She herself is an Exit founder as well. She's based in Boulder, Colorado. Mentors a lot of founders as well, and she's just been through it all. So it's like I said, the founder journey can be incredibly lonely, especially when you're contemplating these big decisions on like, do I go fundraise again? Do I, look for somebody to buy my company? Being able to talk to someone who has been through that process and give her perspective is really useful. I think I should be seeing her soon, actually, in the next couple of weeks. I'm excited for that. But yeah, I think being able to find someone who has led that journey, who has been through that journey is incredibly helpful. And then another person that I also love to credit is one of my bosses from my early stages of my career. His name is Shirish, so that's from the finance world. And that really is more from all of the lessons that I've been able to take from in terms of leadership and the kind of leader that I want to show up as. He's male, so I think people always expect men to lead in certain ways and women to lead in certain ways. But I think through his leadership and through his mentorship, I was able to really lean into a leadership style that felt authentic to myself. When I work for somebody like Chatri, who is a little bit more of like a hot-headed kind of person, sometimes there is that tendency to kind of replicate what works for somebody else. But I always felt like, because that was one of my earliest experiences in terms of having a really great and supportive boss, I've been able to really kind of hone into the way that I want to lead and the way that I want to show up for the people who work for me and the people who work with me.
All I said was shout out to all those good bosses out there who turn into mentors. It's a beautiful thing to seek a good boss who turns into someone like that in the future for you. So I wanted to touch more into the Digital Mavericks. Your book touches on digital transformation. What does this mean for businesses and individuals alike? How can our viewers prepare themselves for this shift?
Yeah, and I think people hear the word crypto and it's obviously interesting. We're going through a phase now under the current administration where there's obviously a clear movement towards embracing digital currencies and embracing the technology and the rails that it's built on. But people till today still kind of look at it like it is something really scary and something that they don't understand. And like I mentioned earlier, it is completely natural to fear the things that you don't understand. What I try to frame in my book is that this really is a natural evolution of the internet as we know it. And the first part of my book really kind of takes us a trip down memory lane. I guess I date myself, but back in the early days, on the internet, like, first of all, I didn't even grow up with like screens or mobile phones or anything, right? Like, so, there wasn't any of that to entertain me as a child. It was, 6 p.m. television or like, put yourself in front of a book or like coloring sheets. Obviously the world has changed a lot since then. And back in the day, when I first got onto the internet, it was like dial up. We had to wait forever to connect to the internet, and even then you couldn't really do much other than use like a basic search engine, chat to your friends a little bit, and it wasn't much that you could do then. And it's actually crazy to me when I look back. Social media was really only a thing after I had graduated from high school, for which I think I am kind of thankful of. Like, I have no idea how kids these days kind of go through that with that pressure. But I think at the time that it was happening, it wasn't something that we all question necessarily, right? I think it was something that maybe as years had passed, we look back and we realize, oh, there were potentially all these harmful things that were put in place with these social media platforms. But at the time, it was something that we all just genuinely embraced because there were new opportunities to really collaborate and interact with each other. And I shared it about my experience as well. I think Facebook came out at a time when I had just moved away from Singapore to the UK for my undergraduate studies. So it just became a really useful tool for me to keep in touch with people from back home, right? It was still really expensive. There was no FaceTime at the time. So it was really expensive to, pick up the phone and call someone, be like $1 a minute to speak to anyone over the phone. So all of a sudden there was this cheap and efficient way of just letting people know that, hey, I'm alive, or hey, this is what I'm doing this weekend, and still feel connected to people that could be thousands of miles away. So, that was that first bit of evolution of the internet that, I think we've all lived through and have all kind of taken for granted. And so in terms of where do we go from here? What are we looking forward to? I think honestly, a lot of this is all going to become more behind the rails. Some people like to say it's like hiding the wires. It's so much so that people are not even going to question, oh, is this crypto or is this on-chain? And some people like to say online is the new on-chain. I'm sure that's a movement. But I think at the end of the day, and again, I don't know what the timeline looks like. It could be in the next 3 years, it could be in the next 5 years, maybe it could be in the next 10 years. But a lot of what we do, even this call, for all could be on chain as well. And we just won't even be talking about it because by that point, it's become irrelevant because it's so ubiquitous and so much a part of our everyday lives. So like I said, for me, it's really about, and again, it may not be for everyone, and everybody has the full agency to decide which path they want to take. But I guess if you're someone who's at crossroads at your career and you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do next, or what do I want to spend some of my free time learning about? Do you want to just kind of sit back and let it happen to you, which is totally fine. That's what happened to me, when Facebook and Instagram started taking off, which is why I'm not a full-time content creator. I'm not a full-time influencer. And there were suddenly some people who really jumped on that bandwagon and are doing incredibly well for themselves. And that's fine. That's a decision that I made and I live with. But now that we're entering this revolution or this next era of the internet, how do you want to participate in it, right? And again, you can just let it happen. There's so many things to do in the world. There's so many different ways to add value. So you can continue doing that. Or if this is something that feels interesting to you and feels like it resonates with you and you want to be able to shape that future of the internet, my book is really kind of like that invitation to really just dive in.
As women in tech, you've broken down barriers and paved the way for others. What advice would you give to young women just starting their careers in tech or entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I would say that, first of all, I think we're moving in the right direction. I know there's been a lot of conversation and things in the news about D&I, and I think a lot of it is really a misconception over what D&I actually is. But I do see more women represented at crypto events. I do see more women represented in tech compared to, 5 to 10 years ago. So I would say we're moving in the right direction. Is it enough? Obviously, no. I think there's also a huge funding gap for women when it comes to venture capital funding. There's also a big gap when it comes to seeing investors, and it's funny because I think every single industry that I've worked in has always been male dominated. I went through traditional finance, so the Wall Street equivalent where, obviously it's male dominated. I worked in combat sports, so obviously that was male dominated. And now, I work in tech and that's male dominated as well. That doesn't mean that there isn't a space for you to really excel. I do think that there are some things that we fall a little to the generalization of, right? There is this common statistic or common data point that is cited where, men will apply for a job even when they don't meet all of the job requirements, but women will only apply for a job if they meet every single one. And I think that doesn't just apply only for job applications. I feel like sometimes that applies in life as well, or just in terms of the risks that we're willing to take. And again, this is all generalization. Everyone is a little bit different, but, I think women as a tendency have, maybe I'm not ready to take this leap of faith unless I can check every single one of these boxes that make me feel comfortable. So, my advice really is to just, take calculated risks, obviously weigh up the downsides, but to be more comfortable with just, taking that leap. Maybe you don't have to take all 10. Maybe if you take 6 or 7, that should be good enough to warrant a seat at the table. And so, yeah, I've been really kind of leaning into that a lot more as well as I've navigated spaces where there have been a lot of men in the room. And I think something like I mentioned earlier as well, you don't necessarily have to conduct yourself in the same way as how men do, whether that's in the boardroom, whether that is, I don't know, at a conference or an event. There is this authentic feminine energy that you can really lean into. And I've got some really great peers who talk a lot about that, fellow founders as well, who, really look inward about what does it mean to lead in a feminine way. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I know everyone, turns to like the Steve Jobs or the Elon Musks of the world and feel like, oh, you have to be this kind of person in order to be a successful founder or a successful entrepreneur. But that's not the case at all. And you can find what that success looks like for you. You can find what that leadership looks like for you. It can be gentle, it can be harsh, it can be whatever it feels right for you. And so, you don't have to necessarily follow the exact playbook that, somebody else has written before you.
Thank you for sharing that. That was a great response. And I'm sure that's going to help a lot of women out there too, to see that we can go into tech. Don't be afraid of it. So stepping into that, what drives your passion for giving back through initiatives like Hug? How do you hope your legacy will inspire future generations?
Yeah, I don't know. And I feel like part of this, maybe I need to unpack like my childhood trauma. No, I love my mom and dad, but no, I think honestly, Singapore is a place where it's always been really competitive. Singapore prides itself on being, very meritocratic. I think it's even in the national pledge. So, it's always been about if you work hard, if you got good grades, and it's not a perfect system. I think no country is a perfect system, but if you work hard and you get good grades, like your efforts will be recognized. And so, I don't know, I feel like there's a part of me that I've always been trying to do more and more and more and more, and for better or for worse, but that has kind of spilled over into what I believe that I can always do more to, inspire people to follow their dreams. And again, I grew up in a really conservative environment. I grew up in a place where people were not really that ready to take risks. And I think to some extent Singapore is still that way today, which is actually an irony because if you look at Singapore as a nation itself, it's a nation that has taken a lot of risks. Singapore as a nation is the ultimate underdog story with no natural resources, extremely tiny, was governed in a way by like our founding father in a way that, a lot of people would have objected to it. And a lot of people had a lot of criticisms about it, but took risks as a nation to establish itself as one of the, most modern and the most developed cities in the world today. So I think it's actually ironic that the country and the nation as a whole is actually a huge risk taker and actually, huge on innovation, but then, culturally coming from like a very traditional, like Asian, a background and upbringing, most of the people there, feel that the path to success is going to all of the right schools, like, doing, like checking all of the boxes. Life is just a checklist and you have to go through those check boxes. And so for me, when I think about Hug, and, a lot of it was how do I empower creators, which is, kind of like a path that is widely regarded as, oh, you can't make any money from this, or you can't be successful being an artist, or you can't be successful being creative. You have to pursue one of these other more traditional career paths. When I look at Hug, I wanted to empower people and to convince people that, hey, it's not that you can't make a living out of doing these things. Maybe you might not get there right away. And I always say this, every single overnight success is actually years in the making. But you could take steps and you could take actions to, create a life that is closer to what you had imagined for yourself. And I guess that's probably kind of what legacy that I want to live. And I think even with the book itself, it's about like, how do I get more people to take more risks? And I'm not saying like, don't necessarily do a me where you quit your job and move halfway across the world with just like 2 suitcases and a dog. Like maybe that's not the right, that's not the right move for every single person. So I'm not saying that, but I think within like your own situation, what are some of the things that you could let go of? And what are some of the other things that you could that was holding you back and that you can now actually feel more comfortable embracing.
Wow, truly inspiring. Thank you for sharing that with us. We love behind the scenes stories. Can you share some fascinating stories or experiences from your journey that didn't make it into the book but are worth sharing with our audience?
Oh my gosh. Well, I feel like, well, the book is pretty personal, so I feel like I cover a lot of things there. Um, I will say, and I don't even remember if this is in the book or not, but maybe I'll just share something from kind of the process of fundraising for Hug. So, we raised our seed round and closed it in April of 2023, or like the first quarter of 2023. And it was right after the collapse of FTX. So it was like a few months after the collapse of FTX. And the raising process was actually going pretty well up until that point. I remember my birthday is in November, so I remember we were like really close to kind of getting a term sheet, around that time, in November of 2022. And it really felt like, oh, okay, great. We already met these people in person for lunch. It was all going well. And then FTX happened, out of the blue. That was also actually a pretty stressful time for me personally because I had money in FTX. I was using FTX as an exchange, as the exchange that I was using in Singapore. And I remember actually just maybe 24 to 48 hours before things really started going up in flames. Just messaging my brother from back home being like, hey, is there anything should I be worried about this? I'm just like seeing some rumblings like on Twitter and on the news. And he was like, I don't really think there's much to be concerned about, but, I wouldn't take the chance, or like, why take the chance? So, I remember it being just kind of like a pretty stressful, I don't know, evening where I was just transferring everything that I had in FTX out into my ledger. It was just like a hardware wallet and knowing that I had full custody over these assets that I had owned. But in general, when you're transferring things from a centralized exchange, it's not instant as well. So, that process just took like way longer than it should have, for all of the great things that crypto is supposed to be. But at the time, it was taking a long time. With all of like the KYC and everything. So already that was kind of like a stressful, like 24 hours or so for myself, just personally, just trying to safeguard my own assets. And then fast forward a couple of days when things start getting really bad, one of the investors that was supposed to be our lead and was ready to give us a term sheet basically had to pull out of the deal, saying that, FTX has happened. We can't deploy any money right now. We need to take stock of how the rest of our portfolio is doing. And that was just that was like such a punch to the gut, right? Like to feel like you were so close and then for all of that to feel like, oh, great. Like not only do I have to start from square one, but is this going to scare off everybody else that we have been talking to? Because we had a number of investors that had like soft committed, contingent on us getting this lead in. In the end, we found a different lead we found a different lead investor, and we were able to, close that round and, go on to do great things, thereafter. But yeah, that was a tough time. And I remember like, it was, like I said, it was around my birthday. I had like organized this birthday party that I had started planning like a few months prior. And I remember like showing up to this birthday party, like just coming off calls over like, oh, this round is like not going to go through, and still having to show up and be happy, even though I really wasn't in the mood to be celebratory. And yeah, that was definitely like a rough time for sure. But like I said, in building a startup, the highs are really highs and the lows are really low. But that was definitely like a war room moment for sure.
Oh yeah, uh, those are the days we want to push back for sure in the back of our heads. That three-letter word of FTX and SBF. So, Digital Mavericks is set to launch soon, if it's not out already by the time of this interview. What can readers expect from this launch? Are there any exciting plans, projects on the horizon? What should we keep an eye out for?
Yeah, well, I'm hosting a little dinner in a couple of days, so I'm excited for that. Just bring a couple of people together in Miami. It's actually also meant to be a little bit of a Lunar New Year dinner come book launch. The one thing that I realized too now, being an author, and And it's also ironic because all of the artists that I work with at Hug and all of the advice that we gave to them was always like, you need to put yourself out there, and here's how you market yourself. Here's how you market your piece of work. Here's how you should talk about it. I realized that is a lot easier said than done, especially when it's something that is so personal. I almost feel it's a lot easier to, like, you work for a company, it's easier for me to market Hug. I mean, it's still hard when you're a founder because like the company is associated to your name, but there is still, to some extent, a little bit of a separation between who Debbie is and who Hug is, right? There's a little bit of separation between, me and like that cycling studio that I founded. They felt like different things. I think when you put something as personal as a piece of art that you're trying to sell, or a book that you're person and poured your soul into it, and are really trying to, hey, look at this book, like buy it and read it, that's when it gets really uncomfortable. And I guess some people also told me to just embrace the cringe and just like, lean into the cringe. But yeah, that has been hard for me. Like, even though I have told so many artists, like, don't be afraid how many times you post on social media. Don't be afraid how many people you tell about this. And I'm having to tell myself that too. But yeah, starting off small with at least like a curated list of people that I feel comfortable with. I am working on building some fun little on-chain experiences, like a little personality quiz so that people can see which digital maverick they're most like in the book, which I'm excited about. And again, I'm doing that completely through AI, with no coding experience. So, that's something that's exciting. And then hopefully at, some events throughout the year, like maybe there'll be opportunity to meet people, share more of the stories, maybe even think about, I really want to kind of expand, like, again, my favorite part of the book was writing out the stories of these people. Like, it says 50% kind of like, how do I navigate the space, and 50% just an anthology of short stories, right? So if anything, just get it for the short stories if you're not into crypto. But I really enjoyed writing those short stories, and I've been trying to figure out what is a sustainable way for me to keep working on those, like whether that lives as like a separate publication, whether that expands out of crypto into AI or expands into other fields more generally. Like, I think there's so many mavericks among us, so like, what can I do to really kind of bring those stories to the forefront? And again, I just want to show that we were all like, you look at these people and you think that, oh my gosh, they are so accomplished, they've had all these crazy lives. The reality is that we all came out of a mother's womb, right? And then the rest of the story was how we wrote it to be. And sometimes it takes somebody else hearing their story before they can really realize that everything was kind of meant to be, was in this strange cosmic kind of way. So I'm hoping that I get opportunity to tell more people's stories that way.
Absolutely. Debbie, is there any upcoming events that you'll be attending, or where people can find you?
Yeah, so I'll be at ETH Denver. That brings together the entire Ethereum community in Denver at the end of February. Considering, I don't know, maybe going to South by Southwest. I haven't quite decided yet. And then probably being in New York at some point. So yeah, I guess still putting together some plans, but hoping that there'll be more of an opportunity to meet people and get the opportunity to share more about the book and why I'm so passionate about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And lastly, where can we learn more about you, Debbie, and your new book, Digital Mavericks?
Yeah, so you can visit the website digitalmavericks.xyz and just kind of check it out. Like, you can see the list of people that are featured there. There's even an option to collect like an on-chain collectible that's really easy. It's just like $1, and you basically collect an NFT of the book cover that is animated. The book cover features art by this artist that I got to know through Hug called Jam. He did all the Pixar characters on it. So, that's, if you have never been on chain before, that is a great and easy way just to get started. So I would do that. And then obviously you can follow me on X. My handle there is Debsoon, Debsoon. And then I also encourage people to take a dive into the world of decentralized social if you haven't been there yet. But it's a decentralized social platform called Farcaster. I'm pretty active there as well. I actually use Farcaster a little bit more like how I used to use Twitter right at the very beginning, back in the day, where I honestly, it's a little bit of like a stream of consciousness micro blogging platform for me right now, because it feels like small and cozy, and sometimes I just like write whatever I'm feeling in the time, like, what breakfast sandwich I had. So I am just at Debbie over there. The team is cooking some really, really interesting things. And again, like it doesn't feel like crypto, it just feels like another app. And I know we're swarmed with social apps, but it just feels like a nice little cozy corner. And so I'm there pretty often as well with, with my beautiful magic internet friends.
That's amazing. Thank you. And for viewers watching this, if you click on our description right now, Debbie has provided a special 25% off link so that you can receive 25% off her book, Digital Mavericks. Thanks again, Debbie, for being on the show and sharing your incredible insights with us. I look forward to seeing the impact of your new book, Digital Mavericks.
Oh, thank you, Nicole.
And for everyone watching, thanks for tuning in to Only the Savvy. We hope you enjoyed this episode with Debbie Soon. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. And as always, stay savvy and stay safe.
Thanks for watching. Help support this channel and receive exclusive offers from one of our partners located in the description. We'll see you on the next one.